In 1981, a car rolled off the assembly line in Northern Ireland that was supposed to change the automotive world forever. This automobile was called the DeLorean DMC-12, though it was never actually marketed with that designation. It was simply known as the DeLorean. And one of the things I like about this story is how it perfectly captures the collision between visionary ambition and brutal reality, between what could have been and what actually happened, all wrapped up in a car with brushed stainless steel body panels and gull-wing doors that would become one of the most recognizable automobiles in history, though not for the reasons its creator had ever intended. Factually, the DeLorean DMC-12 was in production for just over 2 years, from January 21st, 1981, when the first production car was completed, until late December of 1982, shortly after the company filed for bankruptcy. Total production reached approximately 9,000 units, though you'll sometimes see figures slightly higher or lower depending on the source, because production information was lost or scattered when DMC shut down, and production figures were never verified based on official factory records. For the 1981 model year, there were 6,700 DeLoreans produced. For the 1982 model year, there were an estimated 1,999 DeLoreans produced, and for the 1983 model year, there were an estimated 276 DeLoreans, bringing that total to approximately 8,975 cars. The 1983 models were actually 1982 models that had been revined by Consolidated International, the company that acquired the unsold and partially assembled cars in November of 1982. They took the original VIN and added 5,000 to it and changed the CD in the middle of the VIN to DD, thus making a 1983 model. Now, when you look at the DeLorean DMC-12 for the first time, the thing that immediately strikes you is that unpainted brushed stainless steel body. The body is paneled in austenitic SAE 304 stainless steel, the same grade of stainless steel you'd find in professional kitchen equipment and industrial applications. And except for 3 cars that were plated in 24-karat gold, all DeLoreans left the factory uncovered by paint or clear coat. Painted DeLoreans do exist, although these were all painted after the cars were purchased from the factory by owners who wanted something different. The stainless steel panels are fixed to a fiberglass underbody, and the underbody is affixed to an epoxy-coated steel backbone chassis with Y-frames at either end, derived from the Lotus Esprit platform. The body design itself was a product of Giorgetto Giugiaro of Italdesign, one of the most respected automotive designers in the world. To create the car, Giugiaro drew on one of his previous works, the Porsche Tapiro, a concept car from 1970. And you can see the influence there if you look at the 2 cars side by side. That wedge shape, those angular lines, the overall proportion. And, as I mentioned, there are those doors. The gull-wing doors are perhaps the most distinctive feature of the DeLorean, and they're not just for show, though they certainly make a statement when you open them. The DeLorean features heavy doors supported by cryogenically preset torsion bars and nitrogen-charged struts that were developed by Grumman Aerospace, the same company that built the lunar module that landed on the moon. The doors featured red and amber lights to mark their edges at night, a safety feature that was actually quite thoughtful. They also had small cutout windows because full-sized windows would not be fully retractable within the short door panels. Although early production cars had fitment problems due to faulty striker plates and issues with weather seals, these were mostly tolerated because the attention-getting doors allowed occupants to enter and exit the car in tight parking places. You could park between 2 cars with just inches on either side, and you could still get in and out, because the doors opened upward rather than swinging out to the side. Closing the door from the inside can be achieved by using a grab handle, and for people with shorter arms, DMC installed leather pull straps attached to the grab handle. Beginning with late-model 1981 cars, DMC revised the location of the leather pull strap to be centrally mounted and integrated into the lower door panel. But here's where the story takes a turn from fascinating to problematic. Under that dramatic stainless steel body and behind those theatrical gull-wing doors the DeLorean had a 2.85-liter, or 174 cubic inch, V6 engine. This was the PRV engine, which stood for Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, the three manufacturers that had formed a consortium to develop this engine. The PRV was originally designed and built under special contract with the DeLorean Motor Company and was a development of the 2.7-liter V6 used in the Renault 30. The catalyst-equipped PRV engine in the DeLorean was derated to 130 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and torque of 153 pound-feet at 2,750 RPM. A handful of DeLoreans that stayed in Europe were allowed to keep their 154 horsepower rating. Now here's the thing about that PRV engine. The original engineering work was done on a V8 engine, and you can still see that in the resulting V6 engine. Its cylinder banks are arranged at 90 degrees, instead of the much more common 60 degrees for V6 engines. V8 engines nearly universally feature 90-degree configurations, because this allows a natural firing order. V6 engines, on the other hand, produce even firing intervals between cylinders when their two banks of cylinders are arranged at 60 degrees. 90-degree V6 engines, like the PRV, experience uneven firing, which can be addressed using split crankshaft journals, but first-generation PRV engines from 1974 to 1985 featured uneven firing order. This contributed to the engine's somewhat rough character and lackluster performance. DMC's comparison literature stated that the DeLorean could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 8.8 seconds when equipped with a manual transmission, but Road and Track magazine measured the time at 10.5 seconds. Top speed was claimed to be 130 miles per hour, but was tested to be 110 miles per hour. The magazine described the car as not quick for a sports GT car in this price category. And you know what? They were right. This was not a fast car by any measure. Two transmissions were available for the DeLorean, a 5-speed manual and a 3-speed automatic, both with a final drive ratio of 3.44 to 1. The 3-speed automatic transmission, priced at $650 MSRP, was the only extra-cost factory option. Interior color choices were black or gray, with gray becoming available mid-1981 model year. Upon release in 1981, a DeLorean had a base MSRP of $25,000. MSRP increased in 1982 to $29,825, and again in 1983 to $34,000. That's expensive for the time, especially when you consider that the performance didn't match the price tag or the exotic looks. For comparison, a Chevrolet Corvette in 1981 started at around $16,000 and offered significantly better performance. And speaking of those looks, at the time of release, the automotive press was actually complimentary. Motor Trend, Car and Driver, and Road and Track made generally positive remarks about the car, particularly its daily driver qualities, like the comfortable seats on longer drives, unexpected ease of ingress and egress in tight parking, and for such a low car, a spacious trunk. They also praised the pleasant smell of the standard leather seats in the cabin and commendable fuel economy. However, they argued that the DeLorean was more a grand touring car, offering enjoyable handling and performance in real-life traffic and on your favorite 2-lane roads, than a sports car, given its disappointing performance in comparative testing. Later reviews have been harsher. In 2017, Time included the DeLorean in its list of the 50 worst cars of all time. In his book, NAF Motors, 101 Automotive Lemons, Tony Davis described the build quality as woeful. Top Gear writer Richard Porter included it in his book Crap Cars, calling it dismal. But you know what? Those harsh assessments came with the benefit of hindsight and with the knowledge of everything that happened to John DeLorean and his company. Let me back up and tell you how this whole thing came to be, because the story of the DeLorean Motor Company is really the story of John DeLorean himself. In 1973, John DeLorean left General Motors and formed his own car company, the DeLorean Motor Company. At GM, he had been a rising star, heading up the Pontiac division where he had been instrumental in the development of the GTO, often credited as the first true muscle car, and later leading Chevrolet, the company's highest volume division. He was handsome, charismatic, married to a model named Cristina Ferrare, and seemed to embody everything glamorous about the 1970s. He wore stylish clothes, had distinctive salt and pepper hair, and moved in celebrity circles. His vision was to build a car that was not only beautiful and futuristic looking, but also safe and innovative, something that would revolutionize the industry. When details surrounding the DeLorean were first announced in the mid-1970s, there were numerous plans and rumors that the DeLorean would have many advanced features, things like elastic reservoir molding, which was called ERM, a unit construction plastic chassis, a mid-engine layout, a driver-side airbag, 10-mile-per-hour bumpers, and ultra-wide Pirelli P7 tires. None of these would materialize in the production vehicle. Originally, the car was intended to have a centrally mounted Wankel rotary engine. The engine selection was reconsidered when Commodore production ended, and the favored engine became the Ford Cologne V6 engine. The chassis was initially planned to use elastic reservoir molding, or ERM, which would lighten the car and lower its production costs. DeLorean had purchased patent rights to the essentially untested ERM technology, but it was eventually found to be unsuitable. As development continued, the model was referred to as the DSV-12, before changing to DMC-12, the 12 deriving from the target list price of $12,000 upon release. Of course, by the time the car actually went into production, that price had more than doubled to $25,000, which was a significant jump, and I'm sure it disappointed a lot of potential buyers who had been waiting for an affordable exotic car. These and other changes to the original concept led to considerable schedule pressures. The design was deemed to require almost complete re-engineering, which was turned over to English engineer Colin Chapman, founder of Lotus Cars. Chapman replaced most of the unproven material and manufacturing techniques with those then employed by Lotus, including a steel backbone chassis. This was probably the smartest decision that was made during the entire development process, because Chapman knew how to make cars that handled well, even if they weren't always the most reliable. In 1978, DeLorean signed a deal to establish a custom-built 550,000 square foot factory by the Twinbrook Industrial Estate at Dunmurry, 6 miles to the southwest of Belfast. The British government agreed to provide substantial financial backing, around £100 million sterling, in exchange for the promise of creating 2,500 jobs in an economically depressed region that was suffering through the Troubles. Several hundred jobs were created as the company was projected to fulfill orders for 30,000 DeLorean cars a year. This was an enormous boost to that region where Belfast's textile industry had declined by 2/3 in 25 years, and unemployment was rife. After several delays and cost overruns, production at the Dunmurry factory finally began in late 1980. The DeLorean sports car, as it was described in advertisements, began production in December of 1980, with the first production car rolling off the assembly line on January 21st, 1981. Prior to the release of the DeLorean, there was a waiting list of eager buyers, many of whom paid over manufacturers' suggested retail price. However, that exuberance subsided very quickly, and production output soon far exceeded sales volume. October of 1981 was the highest month of sales for DMC, with 720 vehicles sold. But by December, the U.S. was falling into recession, and interest rates were rising, which further negatively impacted sales. Despite this, instead of reducing production, John DeLorean doubled production output, further adding to the inventory of unsold cars. By the end of 1981, DMC had produced 7,500 cars but had sold only 3,000. By this point, DMC was in financial hardship, having sold only 350 units in January of 1982, and in February of that year, DMC was placed into receivership. This was less than 14 months after production had started. It was a disaster. Now, DeLoreans, early production models in particular, suffered from poor build quality and mechanical issues. Early production cars needed as much as 200 hours of work at DMC quality assurance centers prior to being shipped to dealerships for delivery. 200 hours. That's 5 full work weeks of additional labor just to make the car acceptable for delivery. DMC eventually sent 30 factory workers to the quality centers in the US to learn about the problems and how to fix them. Quality did improve over time, and by 1982, many of the quality issues had been resolved. 4 recalls were issued by the factory to correct problems such as a sticking throttle, front suspension issues, and an inertia switch. Other quality issues included additional problems surrounding the front suspension, clutch pedal adjustment or lack thereof, brake rotors, instruments, in particular the speedometer, power door locks, and weak alternators. Many early DeLoreans were delivered poorly aligned, with the toe-in incorrectly set, leading to premature tire wear. The original 80-amp Duchelier alternator supplied with the early production DeLoreans could not provide enough current to supply the car when all lights and electrical options were on. As a result, the battery would gradually discharge, leaving the driver stranded on the road. This happened to DeLorean owner Johnny Carson shortly after he was presented with the vehicle. That's embarrassing. Beginning with cars built in late 1981, DeLoreans were fitted from the factory with a 90-amp Motorola alternator, which solved this problem. In addition, many dealers were reluctant to perform warranty work on DeLoreans, since DMC owed them money for past warranty claims. Some dealerships were not able to perform repair work properly, as DMC never issued a proper service manual. The lack of quality service at dealerships was a point of frustration for many DeLorean owners at the time, particularly those who paid over MSRP to purchase one of the first cars. In February of 1982, unsold 1981 model year cars were priced for immediate clearance in hopes to make room for the more expensive 1982 model year cars. In March, telegrams were sent to all 343 dealerships requesting each buy 6 cars to help save the company. None of the dealers responded with a sales order. By this point, dealerships and the quality assurance centers were sitting on unsold inventory. Hundreds more were sitting on the docks in Long Beach, California as well. By the end of May of 1982, production at the factory was shut down. Another attempt in July of 1982 was made to revive sales by offering discounts to dealerships and offering a 5-year, 50,000-mile warranty with the first year or 12,000-mile portion secured by a major insurance carrier. But this was not successful. The company was drowning in unsold inventory, and there was no way out. Now, this is where the story takes its darkest turn. On October 19, 1982, John DeLorean was charged by the U.S. government with trafficking cocaine following a videotaped sting operation in which he was recorded by undercover federal agents agreeing to bankroll a cocaine smuggling operation. The FBI set him up with more than 59 pounds of cocaine, worth about $6.5 million, in a hotel near Los Angeles International Airport after he arrived from New York. The FBI stated DeLorean was the financier to help the financially declining company in a scheme to sell 220 pounds, with an estimated value of $24 million. The government was tipped off to DeLorean by confidential informant James Timothy Hoffman, a former neighbor, who reported to his FBI superiors that DeLorean had approached him to ask about setting up a cocaine deal. In truth, Hoffman had called DeLorean and suggested the deal, which DeLorean then accepted, as part of Hoffman's efforts to receive a reduced sentence for a 1981 federal cocaine trafficking charge on which he was awaiting trial. In grainy footage captured by a hidden FBI camera at the Sheraton Plaza Lorena Hotel, DeLorean inspected the suitcase full of cocaine and said, "It's better than gold." Toasting with a glass of champagne, he added, "Here's to a lot of success for everybody." Federal agents then entered the room to arrest him. The charges, which would bring a 67-year prison term if he was convicted, drew massive international publicity. Here was this glamorous automotive executive, this former GM wunderkind, this man who had built a futuristic car with his name on it, caught on videotape appearing to make a deal to finance a massive cocaine importation operation. The arrest made international headlines, as the timing coincided with the closing of the Northern Ireland plant for DeLorean motor cars. DMC was insolvent at the time, and $17 million in debt. The DeLorean Motor Company was placed into receivership in February of 1982 and filed bankruptcy on October 26th of that year, just a few days after the arrest of its founder. Consolidated International purchased the unsold DeLoreans and partially completed DeLoreans still on the assembly line and assembled approximately 100 cars to finish the remaining production on December 24th, 1982, Christmas Eve. What a way to end a dream. And that was it. The dream was over. The factory in Belfast, which had provided so many jobs and so much hope to that troubled region, was shut down. The car that was supposed to revolutionize the industry had become a punchline, forever associated with its creator's spectacular fall from grace. After resigning his position, Bruce McWilliams, VP of Marketing for DMC and later acting president for DMC America, said, "The car could never be sold in the numbers John DeLorean predicted." And he was absolutely right. But wait, there's more to this story. DeLorean, 59 years old at the time, never took the stand during the 5-month trial. His defense was that he had been entrapped by the government, that the FBI had essentially created a crime where none would have existed otherwise. Hoffman had approached DeLorean, a man he barely knew with no prior criminal record, at a time when DeLorean was desperate to save his failing company. After 29 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted him on all counts in August of 1984. The way government agents acted in this case was not appropriate, one juror said. Others said Hoffman was a creep without credibility. Some said DeLorean was morally to blame, even if not legally so. "I do not believe it was innocent. It was not guilty," one juror explained. DeLorean was able to successfully defend himself at trial under the procedural defense of police entrapment. But by the time of his acquittal, it was too late. The company was gone. The factory was closed. The 9,000 cars that had been built were scattered around the world, many of them sitting unsold in dealership lots or in storage. John DeLorean had been acquitted in criminal court, but he had lost everything else. His reputation, his company, his dream. And here's where something extraordinary happened. In 1985, just a year after DeLorean's acquittal, a relatively low-budget science fiction comedy film was released that would completely change the legacy of the failed DeLorean DMC-12. The film was called Back to the Future, directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. In the film, an eccentric scientist named Doc Brown builds a time machine out of a DeLorean DMC-12. When asked why he chose a DeLorean, Doc Brown explains that, if you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style? He also implied that the stainless steel construction of the car helped it in temporal displacement. Director Robert Zemeckis suggested the DeLorean because it offered mobility and a unique design. The gull-wing doors would appear like an alien UFO to a 1950s family. Originally, the time machine was going to be built into a refrigerator, but Zemeckis was worried that kids would start climbing into refrigerators and getting trapped, so they changed it to a car, and thank goodness they did. 6 DeLoreans were used during the production, along with one manufactured out of fiberglass for scenes where a full-size DeLorean was needed to fly on screen. The cars used in the first film had the original V6 engine, whose sound in the movie comes from the V8 engine of a Porsche 928. 2 of the cars used in Back to the Future Part 3 were equipped with Volkswagen engines and dune buggy chassis for filming the scenes in the western terrain. The film became a massive hit, spawning 2 sequels and becoming one of the most beloved film franchises of all time. And suddenly the DeLorean was no longer just the failed car from the bankrupt company whose founder had been arrested for cocaine trafficking. It was the time machine from Back to the Future. It was cool. It was iconic. It was a symbol of the 1980s. Kids who had never even heard of John DeLorean or DMC now dreamed of owning a DeLorean, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented in the movie. The DeLorean continues to have a following more than 40 years after the company shut down. The car's distinct looks and popularity from the Back to the Future film franchise make the vehicle widely recognizable. The DeLorean community is international, and there are DeLorean clubs across North America and Europe, as well as clubs in Australia, Japan, and New Zealand. Most automotive museums around the world have a DeLorean in their collection, and the car is often cited as one of the museum's star attractions. In 2021, the time machine was added to the Library of Congress's National Historic Vehicle Register. 6,500 DeLoreans were estimated to still be on the road as of 2015. That's a remarkable survival rate for a car that was only in production for 2 years and suffered from significant quality problems. It's actually a higher survival rate than many far more successful cars from the same era. Despite the car having a reputation for poor build quality and an unsatisfactory driving experience, the DeLorean continues to have a strong following, driven in part by the popularity of Back to the Future. The car has appeared in television and movies, often as a symbol of the 1980s, in films such as The Wedding Singer and television episodes of American Dad and The Simpsons. DeLoreans have been featured on numerous car restoration and build shows, including Wheeler Dealers and Supercar Mega Build. Both the DeLorean and the Back to the Future themed DeLorean have appeared in numerous video games and are included as playable vehicles in franchises such as Forza, Gran Turismo, and The Crew. You can still buy parts for DeLoreans today, and there are specialty shops that do nothing but restore and maintain these cars. So what are we to make of the DeLorean DMC-12? On paper, it was a failure. The company went bankrupt after just 2 years of production. Only 9,000 cars were built when the projections were for 30,000 per year. The performance was lackluster, with that weak 130 horsepower PRV V6 struggling to move the car with any real urgency. The build quality was poor, at least initially. The price was too high for what you got, and the whole enterprise was brought down by its founder's desperate decision to get involved with what turned out to be an FBI sting operation. But here's the thing. None of that matters to most people today. When people see a DeLorean, they don't think about PRV V6 engines or uneven firing orders or quality control problems or John DeLorean's legal troubles. They think about Marty McFly and Doc Brown and traveling through time at 88 miles per hour. They think about flux capacitors and 1.21 gigawatts and where we're going, we don't need roads. They think about one of the greatest adventure films ever made. The DeLorean DMC-12 is proof that sometimes legacy isn't about what you intended or even what you achieved during your actual production run. Sometimes, legacy is about capturing the imagination, about being in the right place at the right time, about being chosen for something you never expected. The DeLorean was supposed to be a revolutionary sports car that would establish John DeLorean as one of the great independent automotive entrepreneurs. Instead, it became a movie prop that achieved a kind of immortality that actual successful cars rarely manage. And you know what? I think that's pretty remarkable. Those stainless steel panels that were supposed to represent a maintenance-free future, those gull-wing doors that were supposed to be practical and dramatic, that wedge shape that was supposed to embody 1980s futurism, they all found their purpose, just not the one anyone expected. The DeLorean failed as a business venture, failed as a sports car, and nearly destroyed the life of the man who created it. But it succeeded in becoming something far more valuable than just another car. It became a cultural icon, a symbol of possibility, a reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements come from the most unexpected places. So there you have it, the story of the DeLorean DMC-12, the stainless steel dream that destroyed John DeLorean's empire, but somehow found redemption through Hollywood magic. A car that failed in every conventional measure of success, but succeeded in becoming one of the most recognizable and beloved automobiles in history. A car with a 130 horsepower V6 that couldn't outrun much of anything but managed to outrun its own troubled history to become a time machine in the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. What do you think about the DeLorean? Leave a comment and let me know. Thanks for listening.